From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Coming up today, a featured speaker at K-State's Swine Profitability Conference yesterday. From Iowa State University, Daniel Linhares will talk about field-level strategies for controlling and preventing diseases in hog production. He'll highlight a still new concept called population-based sampling as a way of identifying disease issues in a hog herd. Then, from the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen will review 3 recent Kansas court rulings of interest, including a major decision on the constitutionality of a Kansas law protecting livestock production operations. And K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven awaits with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. All that and more straight ahead on Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today from the campus of Kansas State University, which yesterday played host to the 2020 Swine Profitability Conference at K-State. Good crowd on hand, as always, for this event. And in the afternoon session, attendees heard from a veterinarian out of Iowa State University who's been studying intervention strategies against the diseases that plague our swine industry, seemingly something coming up every few years or so. His name is Daniel Linhares. Daniel, first of all, at Iowa State University, you're with the Diagnostic and Production Animal Medicine Program, correct?
Yes, Eric. Good to be here with you guys today. So I work at Iowa State University within the College of Veterinary Medicine as part of the swine medicine team, and also serve as a director for graduate education for our department.
You came to the program to talk about field-based disease control and mitigation strategies against the variety of swine diseases. What do you mean by field-based intervention?
Yeah, so the type of research that we do in our lab, we have 7 post-DVM graduate students working in this on evaluation of practices or strategies to significantly prevent, detect, or manage swine infectious diseases under field conditions. So we understand that if you go back to the literature, and there will be a lot of good trials, good experiments done under very specific conditions, which may or may not be valid or extrapolated to specific production systems. So what our group does is develop and evaluate strategies so that different people, different production systems, different realities could measure what's the impact of diseases or health interventions under their specific conditions, understanding that those conditions change over time as the interactions between the viruses, the pigs, and the other viruses that are out there and other factors. This all changes those interactions. So we provide with people the tools so that they can measure disease impact and health intervention impact under their specific conditions in specific points in time.
Because you can't manage what you don't measure. That's the old principle. Now, how to measure the impact of diseases at a given operation? You said there are basically 2 ways, the classic way and something called the population-based sampling.
Yeah, so if we step back a little bit, if we want to measure what's the impact of disease on productivity, you got to have information of those 2 things. What's the pressure of infection or what's the pathogen load in the population, and in the other hand, you got to have measures of productivity, right? Number of pigs produced, or mortality numbers, or average daily gain, whatever you want to measure. So we got to link those 2 things to be able to measure what's the impact of diseases. And a few years ago, the way people track that first component, which is measure pathogen load, would be sampling a few pigs from the population. So you got a big farm, you go there, you open a room and get a few pigs, bleed them, and send samples for diagnostic testing, and you have some measure of diagnostic of pathogen load. But more recently, people have been taking advantage of population-based sample, which is different than a sample that you collect from individual pigs. You use a sample where multiple, if not pretty much all the pigs in that airspace contribute to that sample, right? If you think about oral fluids, you hang a rope where multiple pigs chew on the rope, and therefore that sample is representing hundreds and sometimes thousands of pigs. Same thing with processing fluids. You collect that fluid from the process of castrating tail docking, so that sample may represent all the piglets that are being sampled across multiple rooms over time within a week.
So with the population-based sampling, does one attain a more representative idea of the pathogen activity in a given facility?
That's what we believe, and our data has been showing, is that there is a significant variation in a viral or bacterial load between pig to pig or between pen to pen, or even if you start going from room to room, that difference is way more dramatic. So it's if you want to use samples from individual animals, you really got to have a good coverage. You got to sample 60, 90, sometimes more than 100, depending on the design. So that becomes cost prohibitive to do that on a frequently basis, right? You don't want to run 100 PCRs and do that every week, as opposed to those population samples where you collect the sample that represents several liters or several rooms. You have a good representation there. So if there is a significant variation across room, and there is, your sample will be some sort of a consensus between all the pigs, the litters, the rooms, so that you understand what's the overall pressure of infection at the whole population level. Oral fluids has been around for a little over 10 years now, but processing fluids has been developed and described just within the last couple of years. And family oral fluids, which is when you hang a rope where both the sow and their respective leaders in the room can chew on it, that has been described just within a year and a half or less. So certainly there are some recent developments, and at least the producers that we've been talking with, they've been testing more frequently and taking more frequent advantage of those novel sample types. If you go back to the veterinary diagnostic labs and ask how many samples they are receiving over time, that has been a dramatic increase of samples being tested by the veterinary diagnostic labs. And if you look deeper in the reasons for submission, as people, when they submit samples, they got to check why are they submitting samples. A lot of that increase in testing has been in population-based samples for monitoring purpose. So people really understanding the need to monitor over time and measure and compare how does pressure of infection change over time in between and across sites in their system, right?
So it is a concept that's really starting to hit its stride. But then you have to couple that pathogen volume information with production practices that will dovetail with that activity. What things should producers concentrate on there as far as those production practices and marrying the two volumes of information?
Well, I think one of the key components is to, whatever you do, however you are monitoring, just do it consistently, do it over time, as frequently as possible, even if your sample size or number of samples that you submit is low. It can be as low as 1 PCR per week, but as long as you do that every week and following that same protocol so that you understand what type of population or subpopulation or age group you're measuring, right, into which pathogen, then linking that with productivity data is the second step. And for some producers, it would really depend on the business model. For some, survivability or inverse measure of mortality, right, is more important. For some others, average daily gain is going to be more important. For some others, feed efficiency, maybe a combination of those three, or some others. So people would link those production parameters with measures of pathogen activity to understand, one, how much pathogen they are dealing with, and two, whatever intervention you are implementing, whether there is a vaccination protocol or changing biosecurity or changing pig or people flow, there should be expectation of decreased pathogen load, which is almost always associated with improvement in productivity, which is, of course, a measure of profitability, right?
But it is about adapting to your own operation, what system works for you, because of the variability amongst operations.
Right.
So where do you hope these ideas go from here, Daniel? You've expressed them at this Swine Profitability Conference. Something that producers need to embrace more than they do now?
Yeah, so our big take-home was that swine health, right, it really helps to drive profitability. So there will be some pathogens that are not present in the system, and that's good. But for the ones that are present, that circulate in the system, we really encourage people to measure closely, even if they perceive, no, it's kind of controlled or it's stable. I think we got it under control. We really encourage people to measure, because as you said earlier in the conversation, if you don't measure, you don't manage, right? So people sometimes, they may be surprised on what's the effect of this or that or combination of different pathogens in their profitability. And if you don't measure, you don't know. So take advantage of those diagnostic tools. Take advantage of the productivity data that you collect. Let's link those and let's measure what's the opportunity being left on the table, right, because of those infectious diseases.
It is a constant cause in hog management, whether you're focusing on sow production, grow finish, combination of the above. Disease management is paramount and always will be. And these were great thoughts to share with the crowd here at the Swine Profitability Conference. Daniel, thank you, and congratulations on such good work so far, and good luck in the future with more of this.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to keep interacting with you guys. We have such a great team here at K-State, and be looking forward to keep collaborating with you guys.
Good to have you here. He is Daniel Linhares, a veterinarian at Iowa State University. Once more, he talked on field-based disease control strategies in swine production at the Swine Profitability Conference 2020 at Kansas State University yesterday. And we'll be back with more on Agriculture Today.
With the shortage of primary care physicians, especially in rural areas, health education and disease prevention are vital. K-State research and extension programs address quality of life, personal development, and health behaviors across all life stages of all social economic groups. To learn more about health education, one of K-State Research and Extension's 5 grand challenges, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today, and now we take up more recent happenings in the area of agricultural law. This time around, a trio of court cases all decided here in the state of Kansas. Doing the honors again, as always, is Roger McEowen, professor of agricultural law and taxation at the Washburn University School of Law. And Roger, the first of these 3 cases that we'll take up, has received the greatest fanfare of the 3. It is a court decision on a challenge to a Kansas law which was put on the books now 3 decades ago to protect animal agriculture facilities from being unknowingly infiltrated by those who intended to harm their businesses.
Yeah, Eric. In fact, Kansas was the very first state in the nation to enact a law like this. They're commonly referred to in the media as ag-gag statutes. I do not like that connotation because I think it leaves the wrong impression in people's minds as to what these statutes are all about. The Kansas provision is known as the Kansas Farm Animal and Field Crop and Research Facilities Protect Act. And again, as I said, it was enacted in 1990. So you got to go reach back 30 years to the genesis of this law. And then after the Kansas enactment, a number of states across the country where the livestock industry is rather prominent enacted similar statutory provisions. And basically at their core, what these provisions do is make it illegal for someone to, under false pretenses, or in other words, lie, get a job to gain access to the inside of a defined animal facility. Could be a confined animal facility, could be a slaughter plant, those types of animal facilities. But the key definition there, or the key term to be defined, is what animal facility is. But in general, that's what it is. So the idea here, the notion here, even going back to 1990, when you think about it, these groups have been out there for a long time that are devoted to causing problems for livestock agriculture. They don't like certain types of animal agriculture, particularly confined animal agriculture as well as slaughterhouses. And they want to get inside and take pictures, take videos, and put those out in the public and in social media to inflame the public. And even if there's no illegal activity going on, the notion of what a lot of the public that doesn't have much of a clue as to how agricultural production occurs or how food ends up on the table gets inflamed. And they can create a negative impression in the media and elsewhere, and it can damage the business economically. So that's why the legislature in 1990 took steps to create such a law.
And in fact, those entities had practiced those very things to which the law addressed, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's what happened in this case. There were people that got access by lying on a job application in various employment positions inside these facilities, some of which are supervisory, which even gives them more control of the inner workings of these facilities.
So said activists challenged the law in the state of Kansas. They've done similar things in other states that have adopted this kind of legislation. But the Kansas case itself, on what grounds were they challenging it?
On constitutional grounds, restriction of free speech. The trial court judge said that the Kansas law, in large part, was unconstitutional because it was an impermissible restriction on freedom of speech. I take issue with that particularly because of an analogy that the judge tried to make in determining that the law was unconstitutional. The judge said that, well, it restricts one type of speech but not a comparable type of speech. And the example that the judge used was it would bar speech where someone lies on a job application to gain access to one of these facilities to take pictures and videos that would harm the business, but it would not restrict speech where an individual lies on a job application to gain access to such a facility to do a favorable documentary. Well, I think that is a total false analogy for two reasons. One, nobody is going to lie on a job application to get access to produce something that's favorable to your employer. That makes no sense to me at all. I think that's a false straw man. And then the second one, I want to reach back a number of years on this one, Eric. Some of the listeners may be old enough to remember when Larry Flynt was on trial in Cincinnati. Cincinnati had an act and an ordinance barring his types of publications in the city. And he had a lawyer that represented him in the trial in that case. And the lawyer had an individual on the stand, and he was questioning this person. The line of questioning went like this. He said, "Sir, have you ever been to an art museum?" "Well, yes, I have." "Have you ever paid to go to an art museum?" "I have." "In the art museum for which you have paid to gain entrance, were there paintings of nude women?" "Yes." And then the attorney, in full hearing of the jury, asked him, "Well, why would you call that art and what my client does pornography?" Well, I think that's just a crafty, slick argument by an attorney. I think the one pertinent question that comes out of that, and I think this is what I'm doing, is showing why the judge's opinion in this case falls short, is I would ask the attorney, well, how many marriages have been wrecked because someone went to an art museum? It's ridiculous. There's nothing. And so I think the analogy made by the judge in this case is completely false. I think we've got to do a better job than that from a judicial position to knock these laws out. But nevertheless, that's where this is at.
Squeezing in a couple of other things here, Roger. There was a debtor who filed a Chapter 12 bankruptcy and had a creditor that was wanting to be paid back on the debt owed them by this individual. But there were some complications. You might explain.
Yeah, this points out, it's an easy thing to point out, but people still get confused on this. When you finance something and the creditor wants to take a security interest in your collateral, The financing statement that is the publicly filed document must absolutely correctly display the debtor's name. And the rule in Kansas is there has to be a direct match with the way that the debtor's name appears on the driver's license. In this case, for want of a period and a space, the creditor lost, a little bit over $1 million in security in a combine, a header, and also a tractor, but primarily the combine and header. You have to directly and precisely and exactly match the way the debtor's name is listed on the driver's license. The reason for that, the reason the Kansas law is so sticklish on that, is that someone else who pulls the driver's license of an individual that comes in to borrow money from them, gives them the documentation of who they are, they will use that name exactly as it is on the driver's license, enter it into an electronic system to see if there is a match. If there is a match, that tells that prospective lender that someone else has already taken a security interest in the collateral that the debtor is proposing to provide to the second lender, and so therefore they won't lend because they would come in second if the debtor defaults. That's why that rule is there. You have to match it exactly. That did not happen in this case, and that proved very costly to the creditor. Because
they were then deemed an unsecured creditor in the Chapter 12 bankruptcy proceeding.
That's correct.
The last one we'll cover today in brief. This is about a farmhouse and an apparent burglary, a theft of property that was stored in the farmhouse. But the definition of a farmhouse as a dwelling came into play here. What are the details?
Well, you had the state of Kansas charging the defendant with burglary of a dwelling and attempted theft of property valued at less than $1,000. So you have two separate charges there. The jury found the defendant guilty of both crimes. The court ordered the defendant to a community corrections facility for 24 months. The underlying sentence was 21 months in prison for burglary and 6 months in jail for theft. So the real teeth in terms of the sentence is on the burglary side of things. Those sentences were to be served concurrently, and that's how you get the 24 months out of that. Now, this goes on appeal. The appellate court reversed, and just a few days ago, the Kansas Supreme Court upheld the reversal by the Kansas Court of Appeals. The issue has to do with what is a dwelling for purposes of burglary, and this matters to a farmer, a rancher, or someone that has a rural homestead, maybe an abandoned farm property. They still have a home that's out there and it gets broken into. Dwelling under state law is defined as a building that is used or intended to be used as a human habitation, home, or residence. So if you break into that without authority, that's a burglary, and so you can be hit with a more heavy sentence. The appellate court here said that the residence, based on the facts, the residence was a 100-year-old farmhouse that was used to store personal items that had been vacant for over 2 years before the alleged crime, and the owner had no intent to ever live in it again or rent it out. Based on that, the court said that's not a dwelling for purposes of the burglary provision, so there's no conviction for burglary. There is a conviction for theft, but that doesn't have much of a penalty to it comparatively. The Supreme Court upheld the appellate court determination. So it came down to what is basically a farmhouse that is not used for someone to live in. That is not a dwelling for purposes of the burglary statute in Kansas.
Interesting cases as always, all three. Roger, thanks for the look at these, and we will talk again in a couple of weeks. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rick.
Roger McEowen is a professor of agricultural law and taxation at the Washburn University School of Law. Check out these and other articles on his blog on the website washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. And this is Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
This is the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today, coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University. Eric Atkinson here. Now today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. In his State of the Union speech last evening, President Donald Trump stressed that he has led the country into a new era of prosperity in his first term in office. He highlighted the replacement of the North American Free Trade Agreement, the president saying other politicians had wanted to replace NAFTA, only to do absolutely nothing, in his words. 6 days ago, he signed the brand new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement into law. Here's more from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
In President Trump's State of the Union message, he touted new trade agreements, including the USMCA agreement with Mexico and Canada.
That will defend our workers, protect our intellectual property, bring billions and billions of dollars into our treasury, and open vast new markets for products made and grown right here in the USA.
And that was really the only reference by the president to farmers or agriculture. As he said,
the USMCA will create nearly 100,000 new high-paying American auto jobs and massively boost exports for our farmers, ranchers, and factory workers.
Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Now, the USMCA is projected to boost agricultural exports by about $2.2 billion, or about 1.6%. Dairy, poultry, and wheat exports to Canada are all expected to rise. Beyond USMCA, the president also very briefly spotlighted the Phase 1 trade deal with China. That deal expected to lead to at least $40 billion a year in agricultural exports to China. Now, Bloomberg is reporting that China was requesting flexibility from the U.S. on its purchases of agricultural products under the Phase 1 trade deal between the two countries. However, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative said it has received no request to discuss changes in China's purchase commitments due to the coronavirus outbreak. That, according to a trade representative spokesperson. The Global Times said that purchases of goods by Chinese firms was likely to be delayed in the first quarter, but that purchases could increase later this year, given that the purchase commitments are on an annual basis. Those are the words of Zhao Lingyang, the researcher at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Meanwhile, some suggest that the USDA may release some additional information on the USDA forecasts regarding Chinese purchases of U.S. agricultural goods, ahead of the February 11th WASDE report. And White House National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow said yesterday that he expected the fallout from the coronavirus to delay but not derail the economic boost the U.S. anticipates from the first phase of the trade deal with China. Quoting Kudlow, "It is true the export boom from that trade deal will take longer because of the Chinese virus." The Phase 1 deal calling for China to step up purchases of goods and services from the U.S. Kudlow and others say the purchases could be affected by the economic strains on China, where business and industry has been widely idled as efforts continue to prevent that virus from spreading. But Kudlow said he expected the longer-term impact to be minimal. 3 Kansas entities were awarded federal funds to help support animal disease prevention. Scarlett Hagens reports here that money will help keep the state at the forefront of foreign animal disease preparedness.
The USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service recently awarded a total of $10.2 million to state animal health authorities, land-grant universities, and national animal health laboratories. The money will be used to support disease prevention and emergency response training, as well as enhance laboratory diagnostic capabilities. Funding was provided by the National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program and the National Animal Health Laboratory laboratory network as part of the 2018 Farm Bill, which includes policy focused on helping to prevent animal pests and disease from entering the United States and reduce the spread and impact of potential disease incursions. The Kansas Department of Agriculture and Kansas State University were awarded funds to be used for projects focused on animal movement control and secure food supply plans in the event of an animal disease outbreak. The Kansas State University Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory also received a stipend, which will be used to help improve the electronic transmission of data, thereby strengthening and enhancing the facility's capacity for foreign animal disease emergency preparedness and response. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service also is moving forward with developing the National Animal Vaccine and Veterinary Countermeasures Bank, which was included in the Farm Bill as well. I'm Scarlett Hagans.
Well, we're just a very few weeks away now from this year's edition of Cattlemen's Day at Kansas State University, the 107th annual. It is set for Friday, March the 6th, as always the first Friday of the month of March in Weber Hall and Arena. Opening up the program after the welcome at 10 o'clock, the Vice President of Beef Programs for Select Sires, Lorna Marshall, will be talking about genetic and reproductive trends in the global beef industry. Then livestock marketing specialist out of Oklahoma State University and a frequent guest here on this broadcast, Daryl Peel, will be on board to discuss opportunities for the beef industry in global meat markets. Again, the day starts at 8 o'clock with refreshments, the educational exhibits, the commercial trade show as well, and it's a big trade show this year. 75 participants are signed up there. The cost to attend $25 if paid by February the 28th, or $35 at the door. U.S. Premium Beef and commercial exhibitors sponsoring the lunch. And the afternoon, by the way, will include several sessions put on by K-State faculty and industry presentations as well at Weber Hall, the purebred beef unit and the beef stocker unit. Among the topics to be covered there, factors influencing the sale price of calves, current changes in the Mexican meat industry and the impacts of Mexico's new beef quality grading system. Where ruminant digestion begins will be discussed at a workshop. Forage sampling and analysis 101, another of the workshop topics. There'll be a beef stocker unit tour and much more on that program in the afternoon. Then, of course, it all concludes with the 43rd annual Legacy Bull and Female Sale at 4 o'clock at the Stanley Stout Center. That's all surrounding the event, Cattlemen's Day, Kansas State University, Friday, March the 6th. For more information or to register, it's as easy as going to ksubbeef.org, ksubbeef.org. Cattle producers, get that date and that event on your calendar. We'll be back after a few moments. You're tuned to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today.
When you are in need of timely, reliable, and trusted information, K-State Research and Extension is here. Whether it's organizing people, information, or resources, they have the necessary tools. Community comes first for K-State Research and Extension. For more information and to connect with your county's extension agents, visit www.ksre.k-state.edu.
This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
Think sky, Kansas sky. There are no landmarks in the sky. Yes, the sun, moon, constellations, and stars, but no landmarks.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
If at times it may seem that I'm talking too much about what I saw and experienced during World War II, I will not apologize. It happened, and I'm grateful to all those men and women who were in uniform and those who liberated us. Do not forget this spring it will be 75 years ago. A few evenings ago I talked for a long time with a dear friend who has written about the Omaha Beach landings following closely the involvement of one soldier, an American Indian, Penobscot veteran who was a medic. They became close friends and together revisited Omaha Beach several times. On his first visit, Charles Norman Shea or as he was known as a child, Little Muskrat, lit a ceremonial fire, a small fire. There's a photo of him doing so on Omaha Beach, October 3, 2007. Quoting from the book, From Indian Island to Omaha Beach, the D-Day story of Charles Shea, Penobscot war hero, here are his own words. On my first visit return to Omaha Beach a decade ago, I made a small ceremonial fire and burned sacred tobacco and sweet grass near the place where I had struggled ashore. Fanning the smoke with a sacred eagle feather, I reached out to the spirits of those who died on that beach, seeking peace. I prayed while the sweet-smelling smoke slowly rose, carrying my thoughts into the sky. Charles Norman Shea, sitting there on his knees in the sand, carefully fanning the small secret fire. What was going on through his mind? Maybe just letting go. Letting go. My friend, whom I talked with a long time over the phone while sitting with my feet to the fire, told me that he was making progress with his research regarding the names and military activity and death when and where of the many Canadian and American Indians who died and are buried on Dutch soil. No one ever separated them out. They were all soldiers or airmen. Most soldiers who died are buried in the large military cemeteries either in Halton or Groesbeek, and a few other smaller ones. I have visited Halton several times. My friend, who is an anthropologist, has, with the tenacity of a bulldog, traced the native Indian war dead and their final resting places. In the process, he has found more than 190 locations where Canadian soldiers or airmen are buried. The larger number of places is because very often when a plane was shot down, either going or returning from a bombing run across Germany, those killed were interned in the local cemetery. There may have been 3 or 4 dead. Others were able to jump and parachute to their safety or caught and imprisoned. On a later visit to the Netherlands, I've seen a mock-up of a hiding place in the attic of a house. It was a completely double wall. Only if you looked closely and took measurements could you notice the discrepancy. Against the false wall, typical attic stuff was placed, old toys, sleds, etc. It was very cleverly done. An airman had been hiding in the original hideout and survived. It took courage to hold people. People were shot. So, why think about all this? Of course, the long phone call with my friend. He was born after the war, but he knows. Whenever I drive through Dutch City, I slow down, dipping into town, and look at the plain to the right of the road, in memory of the many planes and pilots who trained over Kansas. I've pulled up the road and walked around the plane. It's not the largest, but I imagine it and others taking off, climbing, setting out on its mission. The plane on display looks as if it's skimming the ground, roaring down in attack. I wonder what a former pilot and crew felt looking at that plane, similar to what they flew. There are not many of them left. If I'm getting old, they are very old. They are, or were, your fathers, your uncles, actually your grandfathers in their youth. They, at least many of them, flew over Kansas, training, learning, and not all survived. I shared with my friend now living near Bath, Maine, that indeed many airmen are interned in the smaller local cemeteries. I told him of one location I remember standing at, and what I remember was only 3 or 4 erect stones with names and dates. I don't remember the names, but standing there I wondered, did I see their plane come down at night, burning, or heard the eerie, piercing sound of the plane in its fast descent and impact, killing all? The day I looked at the graves, it was overcast, and the heavy branches of the evergreens reached out over the stones. It was very quiet. It was still, no noise. I stood there. I thanked them. But how do you thank people who died for you to be free? For me, it is to live and work in Kansas, where the sky is a vast expanse, and there are no mountains, just gentle hills. And some of those who are buried are of the tribes who crossed the plains on their ponies, once their homeland.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas, featured right here each Wednesday. And our time is away for today. We'll be right back here tomorrow at this same time, hoping that you'll join us again then. Meantime, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good day for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.